going to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Let's see, the first thing I need to tell you is there are exits on the sides and in the back. I've always wanted to say that, now I can. So if there's an emergency, leave in an orderly fashion. So again, I'm Rob Rimmer with the Board of Finance. The other members of the Board of Finance here with me tonight, starting from the far left, Marcel Couture, Annie Stirna, Tara Amatrudo, and Andy O'Neill. And we also have Sarah O'Brien, who I'm sure will be here momentarily. So tonight is the public hearing on our proposed budget for 2022-2023. I have to walk over here periodically because the cord only reaches so far. Okay.
Takes me longer to get places now.
And for those of you who don't know, this is Sarah O'Brien. So I just want to say Sarah and Tara are our two newest members. And it often takes a little bit of time to figure out lexicon and which way's up and all that sort of stuff. But these two kind of came preloaded. So they hit the ground running, and they've been good additions, both of them, for all of our discussions. And they didn't take any time to catch up. All right, so budget process. The Board of Selectmen first take a pass at the budget. They did that this year. They basically gave us what I'll call a flat budget. I think it was about $90,000 more than last year. Then they gave it to us, the Board of Finance, and we had a number of virtual and then transition over to in-person meetings in March and April. I think, I forget the day, but we had our first in-person meeting in 2 years on one of the meetings in March, which was quite exciting. We had 8 meetings, at least 15 hours of debate back and forth on what we did. And we ended up taking from the Board of Selectmen proposed budget $85,000 off of what they've proposed. And some of the, I don't know if there was enough to go around, but those were in the back, the proposed budget. And it's also posted on the website if someone didn't get a copy tonight. So, and I'll go over some of those changes a little bit later. We also have a capital budget. We actually somehow ended up adding $50,000 to that. That was basically 2 changes we made. One was a road project over on Beckwith, I think, added $120,000, and we took off a paving project at the transfer station, not because we didn't think it was a meritorious project, but because there's some other things going on with water systems and lines, and we're not really sure what's going to happen with that, so that was delayed for that reason. So again, what that ends up being is, the bottom 2 lines there, when all that's over, we, the Board of Finance, and the Board of Selectmen have proposed an operating budget that is $4,837 higher than last year's, so that's about as flat as can be. And then the capital budget is a more substantial change, $876,000 higher than last year. And that's the last page for those of you who got a handout. And for those of you on the, who look on the website, that'll be there too. So in this pie chart, you can see it shows sort of the overall budget. And I always say we on the Board of Finance think we're doing very important work, and we're trying to look at every line. But we have 26% of the total budget. 74% is the school budget, and that's just sort of how it goes, you know, every year for a town like ours, and especially our town. Let me jump ahead a second. After tonight, the town budget meeting for the operating budget for the town that I'm trying to talk to you about will be May 16th.
May 16th.
May 16th. And the referendum for the school budget will be May 3rd, and you'll actually have to come and fill out your paper ballot for that, as usual. So I won't spend too much time on this one, just the budget comparison. This is comparing last year to this year. Town operating budget flat. School. That's the middle one is the school assessment. That's not the total school budget. That's our school assessment. We have 38.8% of the assessment because we have fewer students than had them. And then the last one's the total combined. So those are all pretty flat, I think is the purpose of that illustration. All right, so anticipated revenue. This is usually pretty flat, but the top line shows total tax revenue of plus $3 million, which is outrageous. What's that all about? Well, that is a direct reflection of the recent revaluation. So all your property values went up. So that's good, except for, tax time. So we're not going to set the mill rate tonight. We'll set the mill rate after some of these other budgets are passed, but I'll talk about this a little more in a minute, but we're looking at a substantial mill rate decrease this year, which sounds great, but it may or may not really impact the American dollars leaving your pocket because, actually I won't talk about it later, I'll talk about it now. Let's say a 3.4 mill rate decrease is a substantial mill rate decrease, but that's sort of what we're looking at based on the reval results, and that would leave you paying sort of the same thing. If we drop the mill rate by 3.4, the average taxpayer would end up paying sort of what they've been paying. So to really give you a tax decrease, we would have to go below 3.4 mils or 3.5 mils, somewhere in that range. Intergovernmental revenues, that's all sorts of money that we send to the state and then comes back to us in the form of grants and various things, educational equalization grant and town road aid and all sorts of things like that. As you can see, that's an increase. Not too long ago, a few years ago, we were always looking at decreases on that. So money's kind of flowing in here, which is a great thing, I guess. All right, so the general fund balance. And some of you well, we haven't had one of these in a couple of years, except maybe remotely, but some of you will already know this. The general fund balance, I guess, is sometimes referred to as the town's savings account. I don't know if I like that analogy or not, but I'll use it for now. I'll focus on that sort of third bullet there about the Connecticut Government Finance Officers Association. We have this idea that we're supposed to keep at least 2 months of regular operating expenditures in reserve for emergencies, disasters, things like that. We've had some emergencies and some disasters over the last couple of years, and we never really tapped into that. But whatever, we try and do that. We want to keep at least 2 months in there. You go on down, can be used to stabilize the mill rate from year to year to avoid sharp increases or decreases and help all of us plan our finances. And that's something we've done. In 2020, we on the Board of Finance made some dramatic changes to the operating budget because the pandemic landed during budget season, and we assumed, perhaps incorrectly, that we were facing not only a health issue, but an economic issue. So we made some major cuts, and so did the school board. They made some major cuts. And we ended up, because of those, lowering the mill rate by 3/4 of a point that year. And so we've been living with that sort of steady mill rate for the last few years. We could have cut it more than that. There were advocates, I would say myself, who wanted to cut it more than that, but I think, thankfully, my idea didn't win. So what ended up happening is we didn't yo-yo back and forth, but it goes up and down. It's been stable. And since we didn't cut it as far as we could, it's allowed us to maintain not only that 2-month cushion, but a little more, which I'll talk about in a second as well. Actually, maybe I'll talk about it now. So at the end of I don't know if I can see that far without glasses. At the end of 2021, our year, of course, runs July 1 to June 30. So at the end of June 30, 2021, this fund balance had $5.5 million in it. So that brings us, that's how we arrive at the current year we're in, that will end in a couple of months. So in order to keep the mill rate stable, we on the Board of Finance, the second line shows $176,000, $176,443. We took we budgeted to take 176,443 out of that general fund so as not to raise the mill rate by whatever. And it stayed stable. Now we're coming to the end of this year and we have not yet taken that 176,443. Where's Gina? Right? That's right, okay. And it seems like we won't. So it's budgeted for, I think for this calculation, we're gonna assume that we've taken that money out, but we really didn't. It turns out we didn't have to. The third line shows capital funding, almost $1 million we did take out of that 5.5 to go to some capital projects last year. The next line, and we'll talk about capital in a minute, but capital is all sorts of things. It's primarily highway, fire company, can be other things, Parks and Rec this year, some other things, but it's a lot of highway and fire. It's never schools, anything like that for our capital budget. So anyway, line 4, estimated surplus for 21-22. It's a little early, it's a couple of months left in the year, but we're anticipating a substantial surplus in the operating budget for 21-22, $400,000. So at the end of that, fast forward 1 year, in a couple of months, June 30, 2022, that leaves our estimated general fund balance at $4.8 million. By the way, everything I'm saying makes sense to me. Is it making sense to everybody? Okay, good. All right. So now here's the 2 months. This is what we're talking about. What is 2 months? Well, 2 months, that next line, $3.627 million. That's 2 months of our total operating budget that we're supposed to hold in reserve. So you can see at the end of June 30, we're expected to be $1.2 million over that. Now, we do our best, and I always joke, Marcel and I are the senior statesmen now. We've been here for 6 years. It's not really that long, but when we were here, we would get news on days like today, and it would be bad news. Oh, yeah. That the state is taking something away from us that we thought we were going to have, or they're charging us for something we didn't think they were going to charge us for, or whatever. It was going to change all these numbers at the last second, and it was going to be bad. And so that's how life is, and we have a couple of those things today, but one of the big ones I want to report to you, the available difference as of today, $1.2 million. So in 2018, which to me seems like yesterday, we had that flood, and depending on where you lived, it was pretty bad. Maybe it wasn't, depending on where you lived. And it might have been more than the flood, I'm not really sure right now, but we spent a lot of money. Town made applications for FEMA grant reimbursement, and finally, after all this time, the check has landed. I think this very week, maybe. Okay. It landed this week, and that's $371,000. So the available difference as of today is not really $1.2 million, it's $1.571 million. So I'm sorry, and so, just so I'm clear, it's not that we have $1.57 million. We have $1.57 million over the $3.6 million 2-month cushion we try and hold. Okay.
Kudos to Walt on that, by the way.
What's that?
Kudos to Walt on the FEMA reimbursement.
Nancy Gorski's up here. She says, kudos to Walt. Walt Adams for the FEMA reimbursement. And all kinds of, and all you did in 2018 when the flood came through too, I'm sure. All right. Okay, so the capital budget, again, this is the last page for those of you who got the handout. We're anticipating spending. I talked in one of the first slides about adding some money and the Board of Selectmen doing this and us doing that. Well, the total expenditure for our capital this year is $3.2 million. That's quite a bit. So the funding sources are listed there. We've been in the habit of taxing you right now for a portion of that. So it's by the charter we can lay a tax of up to 1.5 mils. The mill rate is increased from $710,000 to like $825,000. So our proposal is to sort of pretend the mill rate's lower and only tax new tax dollars of $1,060,000, and that's what we've been doing to go towards capital. that could be increased, I'm not the mathematician, but by a couple $100,000, I think. We debated that at least a little bit, and we didn't do it.
Just to clarify one thing, what he meant to say was 1 mil is about $810,000, as opposed to it used to be about 750. So that's not the mill rate, that's just what 1 mil is. That's what he meant to say.
That's what I meant to say. I don't know what I said, but that's what I meant to say. I wasn't listening to what I said.
You want to do the math for what a mill is.
Yeah.
It's the assessed value of all our property.
Right, the mill, I think, hopefully people know, the mill is the assessed value of the property. Total aggregate for the year we're in, a mill was represented by the total $710,000, something like that, 1 mill. And so our mill rate turns out to be whatever, I should know, 26 point something, I forget. Because of the revaluation and the property values going up, a mill is now about $100,000 more. So what that means is, for what I'm trying to say now, whether it's making sense or not, is that we could put more money, we could tax ourselves and all of you more right now to go into the capital budget. And we have decided not to do that. We could have put another couple $100,000 of dollars we would tax you on right now to go to capital, but we didn't. Well, why didn't we do that? Well, a couple reasons. We have other funding sources. ARPA, DEEP, and LOSIP. So LOSIP is money from the state. It's about $50,000 to $55,000 reliably every year. It's going to be that again next year. The DEEP, I think is that the $500,000?
That's Eric Gallo.
So there's, on the capital budget, there's a $500,000 figure associated with Parks and Rec, which is connected to a field at our park. But there's a $500,000 grant for that, so that's sort of a wash on that. ARPA funds, I'll say what I can without hopefully misstating it, but we're getting, on top of all this other money and revenue, we're getting 2 tranches of federal money for pandemic relief. And they're just under $1 million each. It's $900 and something thousand twice. And so there's an economic review committee. What's the R stand for?
Recovery.
Economic Recovery Committee. An economic recovery committee that's been hard at work looking at all sorts of uses for this money. Ultimately, their work will go to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen will make a decision. So for this year, even though there was a potential to use up to, I'm going to say $950,000, I'm not exactly sure what the exact figure was, based on the work the Economic Recovery Committee did and based upon the review the Board of Selectmen did, $561,000 have been allocated towards the capital budget. Okay. So, between the $1 million that you're going to be taxed on, the $561,000 from ARPA, the $500,000 DEEP, the LOSIP money, there's also some money from this year's capital budget that we didn't use yet. Well, let me talk about this for just a second. This is what the capital expenditures are this year. This is what I was trying to say before. Road projects, highway equipment, that's $1.5 million. Fire, just under $800,000. You got the $500,000 park and rec I was just trying to talk about with the grant for the field. And then other municipal facilities, that turns out to be a paving project and I forget what else right now. No, that's highway department. It's, some computer upgrades, library, parking lot, some other things like that. That's on the back sheet of your handout as well.
Right. Just want to point out the $500,000 park and rec. We will pay for that, but we will be reimbursed by, it was DEEP.
Yeah.
So it's there, but it's federal money essentially, or state.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I don't know if people could hear that, but Marcel was pointing out that the $500,000 for the field will be reimbursed for that. So we'll spend it first, then we'll be reimbursed by the DEEP grant by the state. So that's great. We just got reimbursed for something that happened 4 years ago. So don't necessarily hold your breath, but that's how it goes. We're good for it, I think. All right, so, all right, good news, I think, hold on, let's see. Good news, I'm nearing the end. The proposed capital funding sources for this year. So we start out with the $3.2 million we plan to spend. This is the $1 million, it says transfers from general fund. That means we're about to tax you for that. Existing capital funding in place, that means money that, for whatever reason, we thought we were going to spend this year, but didn't happen. Either we saved money on projects, and believe me, everybody tries to save money where they can, or maybe there were some projects that, you know, people just didn't get around to or whatever. The estimated grant, that's the $500,000 we've been talking about. The ARPA funding, $561 we talked about. So again, that ARPA, that would leave not quite, let's see, 1.4 million, 1.3, 1.4 million, somewhere like that, to be used in the future as the Economic Recovery Committee and the Board of Selectmen decide. LoCIP funding, yeah, that's that 50 to 55,000 every year from the state. So all that leaves us with a shortfall of $864,000. Doesn't sound too good. What are we going to do about that? Well, that is that overage we have from the general fund. So we thought we had 1.2 million more than 2 months, and it turns out we have 1.5 million more than 2 months. So generally speaking, that's what's going to happen to the 864 shortfall. What comes next? Who knows? Again, I was hoping people would interrupt me. Well, a couple of you guys interrupted me, but you guys can interrupt in a moment and ask all the questions you didn't ask yet. And we're going to have, in the second line, the school budget referendum again, May 3rd. That's here. You come fill out the bubble. May 16th, we'll meet back here, right here, for the town budget meeting where we'll vote on operating and capital that I've been trying to discuss. May 3rd, you fill in the bubble for the 76% of the budget being the school budget. Again, all this stuff is on the website. And it says, the last line says, the Board of Finance will finalize the budget and set the mill rate by May 23rd. Okay, that sounds good too. I don't know when we're going to set the mill rate, because a few years ago, there was all this uncertainty with the state. What's the state going to do? And I think there was a year the state finally passed the budget Labor Day or something. I don't know. So I don't think that's going to happen this year because the state is somehow doing very well too. But we always want to have as much information as we can before we set the mill rate. So if the system works, by May 23rd, we will know results on. It's too much to say we'll know results on state budget, but it seems, you know, pretty stable this year. But with any luck, we'll know results on the Board of Ed referendum and what we do at the town meeting here on May 16th. Then we'll be able to reliably set a mill rate at that point.
Rob, can I input something?
Sure.
Question here, Rob.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So, Rob,
Yes. Hold on, I was looking for a piece of paper.
So just to clarify a couple of things what Rob had said, when he says that the money that we're going to tax you on, what has historically happened here is from the operating budget, we would usually take about 2 mills, which worked out to about $1,060,000. Now, we've just told you that the actual 1.5 per charter, so it's like 1.5 mills. So technically, if a mill is 800,000, we could take $1.2 million, maybe $1.250 million. We haven't done that. We kind of kept it at $1.060 million because we do have, if you will, some overage, and I'll use the term Rob says, in the town savings account, if you will. So if you look at the 2 months expenditures we're supposed to keep, it's about $1.8 million per month. So if we have $1.5 million over, we're going to take some of the overage from that rather than tax you additionally on that. But that's what he's talking about when he says you're going to get taxed on some, because we take some from the operating funds that we're getting from the tax year, and we attribute that to capital. So just so you know, we're not in the habit of keeping a huge
sum of money. There has been some rancor in the town, some political rancor for some people, but I have to tell you, on this board, there's none of that. Everybody here got phone calls about neighbors saying my assessments went up, are my taxes going to go up? So we're all very keen on looking at lowering that mill rate and pretty much keeping everybody's taxes as flat. But I just want to let you know that's what we're all looking at. We all have to pay the same thing as you. So we're trying to keep this as stable as we can. The mill rate may drop, but your taxes are probably not going to go down, but hopefully not really go up. And that was part of the plan here, because none of us want that to happen.
Thank you, Andy. There's always a rebuttal. Thank you.
So confirmation.
Yeah. No. Well, one other thing I want to say is I've been talking about kind of a flat budget. So the proposed, and I'm not here to talk about the school budget. So if there are any questions, even if I think I know the answer, I'm not answering them. But I do want to say that the proposed our assessment on this proposed school budget this year is up $123,691 over last year. And that has to do with an increase in the proposed budget from the school. It is less than it could have been for a couple of reasons. There's often an auditing result, and we have some lesser amount we have to pay because of that. And then we have a substantial decrease this year due to a so-called self-insurance fund that the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance, and maybe even had to have been going round and roundabout for some time. And finally it was resolved. The Board of Ed got a legal opinion, and we are getting a credit, I'll call it a credit, whatever the right term is, of $678,000. So that's a substantial credit we're getting this year. And we'll see what happens to the school budget. So I'm sure you have a million questions about that, but don't ask me. All right. Now, are there questions or comments? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, well, all right, I'll try and be MC. We only have one mic.
I just have one question. Good evening, everyone. The 900K coming back from the pandemic, is there a time frame that's actually has to be expended?
Two of our members are on the ERC, so maybe I'll let, who wants to answer that? Okay, go ahead. Sarah. Sarah's
She has all the numbers.
Everyone heard the question, right? Yeah.
For the ARPA funds that are received, I believe they have to be allocated by 2024 and spent by 2026.
Okay, who else? Why don't you guys sit closer to the front? I should have set up back here.
First thing I wanted to ask is, do you have I'm assuming you don't because I've looked at the PowerPoint, but I think it would be helpful for everybody in this room if there was one PowerPoint that brought all these dollars together so that you clearly saw your revenue sources, your gross budget, your difference, so that, I know it's on all these individual pages, but I think it's a little hard for people to follow, and I think that one sheet with all these numbers would be incredibly helpful.
Thank you. For those of you who got the budget handout, there is a one-sheet income page. The operating budget itself can't really be done on one page because it's too many items. And then there's a one-pager for the capital. For those who didn't get it, it is on the website.
As I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, a veteran that qualifies for tax relief in Killingworth, if he's 100% disabled, he gets $6,000 taken off of his assessment. Is that correct?
That I don't know.
Okay. Well, if it is, that means that he gets this veteran who is qualified based on the number of years he was in the war and things like that, and he comes back and he's 100% disabled as a result of his service. He gets $6,000 taken off of his assessment. So if his assessment is $300,000 for his house, he's only going to pay taxes on $294,000. Excuse me? I'm sorry. So, that person who is 100% disabled in Killingworth gets $160 a year in his pocket as a result of serving all of us, getting 100% disabled in service. So he gets $13 a month. I think that's an insult. I am a veteran. I do have a disability. I would never apply for veteran relief in this state, in this town, because it's an insult to me. I won't, because what's $13 to me? And I don't have 100% disability, although some people think I'm totally disabled. But anyways, I think, and by the way, when you reduce the mill rate, you're taking away money from him, right? Because it's his benefit or her benefit is determined by the mill. So if it's right now we're talking about what, $26, right? So if you bring it down to $23 for every 1,000, he's going to get less money. So I wish you would address that issue when it comes to veterans. The other thing I'd like to address is the $200,000 you have in this year for the town hall. Well, I don't know if you guys know, we're fixing up the town hall. And that's probably going to cost us maybe $40,000, $50,000. So why do we have $200,000 in there to design a new one when the $50,000 we're probably going to spend to fix up what we presently have probably will last us 5 or 10. Take the $200,000 out of that for this year and put it in something more useful than, and by the way, next year you got $1,800,000 for the town hall that we're not going to fix because we're fixing it this year for less than $50,000. So that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Excuse me.
Thank you. So, I was saying to someone, Dan O'Sullivan, where's Dan O'Sullivan? I was saying to Dan O'Sullivan when we were discussing something, the Board of Finance has been a fairly independent body, and we've not for political reasons, just sort of institutional reasons, we've sort of taken some votes and actions that the Board of Selectmen over the years probably weren't so happy with, but we've expressed our independence. So I don't want you to think I say that because I don't want you to think we're passing the buck or anything, but the, in terms of a tax assessment relief, whether it's for first responders or disabled veterans or whomever, I think that doesn't come from us really. That comes from the Board of Selectmen. So that doesn't take away from your point, but and all the selectmen are here, so they've heard it. So, but that has to come from a different vantage point. And then the as far as the 200,000 and the 1.8 million for the town hall, and I would also draw your attention, and I'm not looking at those numbers now, but there are similar disparate numbers for the fire station. And so what ended up happening, those numbers were originally much larger for this year, and it wasn't our work so much, it was the Board of Selectmen's work, to their credit, and they looked at it and said, well, we're not gonna allocate $2 million for a town hall, or I think it was $5 million for a fire station, because they're not shovel ready, so to speak. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take portions of that money and we're gonna prepare those projects. We're going to do whatever it is we have to do to see what needs to be done, to do plans, to do whatever all that stuff is. And so stay tuned, I guess, on that for those two larger projects in coming years to see how that really turns out. Great. Anybody else? Yeah. You already had a turn.
Sorry. Can I make a statement up at the podium?
Why not?
Okay, thank you. It's nice to meet everyone in person for change. I'm Greg Wing. I'm good.
Just don't touch my stuff.
The Excel spreadsheet is right there.
I'll put this here. I've scripted this out a little bit so I didn't miss anything. So I didn't want to miss anything. But thank you. Oh. Let's go here. Capital, another holder. Okay.
DOE.
You can slide that in for sure. All right. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity tonight as a representative of the Killingworth Crier Committee, an active 12-year member of the Killingworth Lions, and a citizen of this committee or community for 30 years. Up to this point in time, several formal requests have been presented to both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance in preparation for the new fiscal year operating budget. Our ask was not for Town Hall to subsidize the Crier or become a publishing house. It's just paying for some of the space dedicated for the important Town Hall news, town meeting schedules, and town services information. The amount requested was $5,400, which is the actual cost to produce and print 1.5 to 2 pages for a 12-month period, which has been printed for free to Town Hall for decades. The value that the Crier brings to the community is certainly far greater than the minimal burden that we are proposing. Our request had been declined up to this point in time and would hope that the Board of Finance would reconsider its decision to support this extremely important and exclusive town publication. The initial proposal was to add a town communications line item to the budget that bundles the pieces that effectively reach all the demographics in this community. These would include town website, email services, town notices, and printed materials and publications. The majority of these are already contained in this year's operating budget. However, printed publications of this nature are not. I'm sure you are all aware that the Crier remains the only all-Killingworth publication that has been in existence for 30 years, delivered free to every resident and business and supported only by advertising dollars from town businesses and non-for-profits. It's the only publication that encompasses town information that reflects the true spirit and essence of our community. If the Board of Finance were to reconsider their decision and include this in the budget, you are in turn supporting all the businesses, non-for-profits, and community volunteers, which reflects a positive and supportive message from our town leadership. The Crier is a vital publication that reaches every resident and business in town. So if it goes away, how can we continue connecting and reaching everyone in the community with the same effectiveness? The Crier is the cog in our community wheel. Our hope is that you will choose to support it and all the entities that enhance this community immeasurably. Secondly, our town's non-for-profits, the Killingworth Lions, KWO, Helping Hands, Food Pantry, HK Backpack Program, Shared Harvest, local churches, historical society, and library rely on the Crier to communicate their fundamental messaging to all our residents, including any of the generations that appreciate printed publications in lieu of social media and digital platforms. Back in early March, a campaign was started to enlighten the community as to the challenges that the Crier is facing and the concern for its future. Many of the residents had no idea. However, it was apparent that the community looks forward to receiving and reading the Crier each and every month. Over 400 community signatures were obtained to support this request for the minimal amount to be included into the town's operating budget. For the record, I submit these signatures to the Board of Finance. I have them with you and I'll leave them. Lastly, the Board of Selectmen has appointed a Town Historic Review Committee that is charged with encouraging the preservation of architecturally and historically significant buildings, sites, and structures in Killingworth. To this end, this committee interacts closely with Killingworth's Historical Society to ensure that these structures are preserved and not prematurely demolished. Our town historian is asked to research and provide historical facts about many of these landmarks, structures, buildings that date back to the 18th century. Many of these writings and significant stories have been included and published in the Crier, where they are currently archived at the Historical Society and Library. These are certainly important publications that no other newspaper can match or refer to, that captures both the history and the unique aspects of our town. Words from the Crier editor, Karen Milano. She's been the editor for 10 years now. What it truly comes down to, the choice is either to contribute to keeping this small town unique form of communication available to residents by covering at least a portion of the pages Town Hall occupies, or deciding not to support the community effort. And that's what the Crier has always been, a not-for-profit community effort communication with this town's people. Witness all the volunteers who help us bring it together, and all the entities that contribute and use it as a vehicle for information. What inspires me, Karen, to continue are the people and the small town beauty of Killingworth, the sense of community that brought me here to raise my family. That's what the Crier embraces like no other local publication, and it's why a small group of concerned townspeople, and among others, are trying to preserve it. To quote one more time another line from a member of the board, it's a small ask. We hope that the Board of Finance reconsiders including the small request of $5,400 into the new budget, which is relatively small for a publication that is counted on month after month by our non-for-profits and community as a whole. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Greg Meltmore.
Thank you. My name is Bill Joyce. I live in the Beechwood community, and I'm a little surprised, and maybe the board of, you guys don't understand, Beechwood and how important Crier is to the community there. They have a lot of shut-ins. That's the only one of the few things they get, and they look forward to it. I just want to let you guys know that. And also the information that gives this town or these people to read and find out about events and things that are going on is very important to them. So I just want to let you guys know is there's a lot of people, and I was helping get signatures, that would call me up or say, please come by, or would come to my door and say, I want to sign this, because they feel it's very valuable. And like I said, there's a lot of shut-ins, and they look forward to that every month. And I just wanted to let you guys know that, because I was surprised that 4 out of 6 of you voted against it. So I just wanted to let you know how important it is to, seniors, at least in the Beechwood community. And I just wanted to let you know. So thank you very much.
Okay, so can I have your name, please?
My name is Bill Joyce.
Bill
I live on
Joyce.
28 Swan Lake Trail.
Bill Joyce is good enough. Thank you.
Thank you. You already had a turn too. I gotta be somewhere at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, but otherwise.
I think Greg and Mr. Joyce said a great deal, so I don't want to go into all those details. But I think this is one of those opportunities that you listen to the residents of this town and you just do the right thing. I think that we all have that dedication to the Crier, and sometimes the answer is just that simple. Do the right thing. I do have another little write-up too, but the first thing I wanted to say is I want to thank every first responder in this room and your families for their dedication over the last 2 years. And I really mean that. I mean, I don't think we can possibly understand how difficult this has been, but we're grateful, and we're grateful for you every day. First thing I want to say is I think the hardest thing for me to get my head around tonight is that we're actually here to discuss the pension for our fire and ambulance, and whether it should be part of our town budget. It's quite incredible to think that that's the issue tonight. The fact that this room is filled with the most dedicated members of our community that spend a great deal of time away from their family, and here they are again tonight. Here tonight to ask and plead for this committee to do the right thing. The issue tonight is much bigger than adding $20,000 to the annual budget. The money is only part of the problem. The real problem is the delay and the approval of the plan. Because if the plan is not approved, the money really means nothing. Plus the June 30th deadline needs to be hit for all this to be retroactive, because that's what they've worked for. This additional work is delaying the process and jeopardizing the meeting of the deadline. I have attended many of the BOS and BOF meetings this year, and I keep hearing we need to do what's right for the taxpayer. Now, I've been a taxpayer in this town for nearly 26 years, so I'm very well aware of that. But I'm not sure that you understand really what that means, because what the residents want is to support our first responders. No matter what happens tonight, everyone knows that we feel secure and they will continue to run to our aid no matter what. That's not in question. But we need to do this for them. Approve the plan. It's that simple. I sit and listen to a lot, and not a single group through this entire process is scrutinized the same way that the fire department is. Interesting enough, the fire and ambulance pension has not been revised since 1989. I don't know how many of you know that. It's quite remarkable. Also, their pension is underfunded, while the pension of our town employers is overfunded. Don't get me wrong, I'd like you to have your pension, it's nothing about the town employees. But I have to wonder why the same scrutiny didn't get called into question or even discussed in this year's budget workshops when it came to the town employee pension. If one is checked and rechecked, why not the other? Why has the Board of Selectmen's due diligence not happened on that fund? I hear over and over about not taxing the residents unjustly. What does that really mean? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because that's why we call this a budget and not actual. There are many, many things that are in this budget that are estimates, because that's just the way it goes. From the very start, when the money was removed from the budget by the Board of Selectmen, there was every indication that we would be here tonight discussing this. The decades and decades of service in this room, in my opinion, give them the right to make the determination of what will work for them to retain and incentivize their members, at whatever the cost. We need the town residents to stand with our first responders and vote down the town budget, not only if the $20,000 isn't in there, but if they don't have the final approval from the Board of Selectmen by the town meeting. It's not too late to do the right thing.
Thank you. Some of you know, some of you don't know, this is another one that is not really our thing. An ordinance has to be passed. The Board of Selectmen have been working on that. Some of you have been to Board of Selectmen meetings, you're aware of that. Maybe some of you aren't, but they're working on that. There's a mechanism to fund that when that ordinance is passed. I'm confident it will be passed, but that's not something our group of 6 is really tasked with. As an example of how that works, when this public hearing session ends tonight, we'll have a meeting and we're going to take up a request from the fire company, as I understand it, for an additional $25,000 expenditure for the current year. Not for next year, but for the next 2 months. And so we can't do that. Not that we don't want to do it, or we think it's a good idea, we can't do it. The charter doesn't allow it. The charter sets a different figure, different amount. What can we do? Well, we're going to see what the group of 6 do. What I will recommend is that we ask that that question go to town meeting. That's what the charter says to do. There are processes and procedures to be followed here. I'm confident that's what will happen. There'll be a town meeting. That $25,000 or whatever the needed amount will be approved. Same with the pension. There's a process, there's a procedure. It's going as it's going. I'm sure it's not fast enough, but that's what's happening, and the ordinance is being put together and it's being reviewed, and the auditors are auditing the auditors and all that stuff. So when that is done, what I want to say before I hand it over to Nancy here is that in my mind, a similar procedure will be followed. I don't know when that'll be done. Maybe it'll be done by May 16th, I don't know. But if it's not, it'll be the procedure I'm trying to explain to you that we're going to take on tonight, meaning there'll be yet another town meeting. It'll be funded once the ordinance is passed.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. For the rank and file, we are working on this. We met last night with, so right now where we stand, we're waiting for Hooker and Holcomb. It's another actuarial service doing a peer review on TPS to make sure that the numbers come out correct. That's number one. Number two, we have a pension attorney who's looking at the plan. This plan is different than the employee pension plan. It's not a qualified plan. You are volunteers. We need to make sure that's well documented and it can be maintained going forward. That piece is in place. So we have Hooker and Holcomb doing their work. We have the pension attorney doing their work. And then lastly, we have to have an ordinance. The ordinance is not for the pension plan. The ordinance is for the stipend. For those individuals, we have the abatement in our ordinance, but for those individuals who don't have real property in this town, we have to draft an ordinance. So from process standpoint, if we get all of this information back, I'm going to suggest by the May 23rd Board of Selectmen's meeting, we could potentially then, we can enact the ordinance, and then we can have a town meeting where all of this can move forward. That said, we're within there's $20,000 less in the budget to pay for all of this based on what the actuarials came to us. And whether or not we put it in, if the Board of Finance suggests to put it in today, or whether we do that when we meet in June, we're working to get this done. Yes.
Hi, my name is Laura Lefko. I am the chairman of the Killingworth Republican Town Committee, and I think the issue is actually what Nancy just stated. It's whether or not the Board of Selectmen vote to put the extra $20,000 into this year's budget to fully fund the plan for the firemen. And on behalf of the Killingworth Republican Town Committee Executive Board, I'd like to read this statement. We would like to express our unanimous support of the pension plan for the KDFC and the KAA. Their ask is very minor in comparison to the benefit that our town receives through their work. These are our neighbors and friends who show up when we are in trouble, no matter the weather, the time of day, or what is going on in their own homes or lives. And to us, it is very reassuring to know that they are there. Other towns with volunteer fire departments do not have the luxury that we do of knowing that our volunteers will show up 100% of the time. And that is true. In other towns with a volunteer fire department, they don't have 100% response rate. The KDFC and KAA have worked endless hours on this initiative. They have answered every question and fulfilled every request. The original work was done by the town actuary. We did not need a peer review of the work that had already been done and paid for. This was requested by Selectman Young and supported by Selectman Annino at an additional cost of approximately $8,000. Why? We trust the town actuary and town attorney for everything else without peer review. This may sound like an emotional plea, and it is. We want the fire department and the ambulance association to continue their volunteer work and to be here for us when we need them. We want them to want to do this for us and to know that we appreciate what they do. It is ridiculous and sad to see how many times they have had to come before the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance to ask for this. We can hear the frustration in their voices as time goes on. Do you hear what they are trying to say to you? They are telling us that without this small bit of recognition, we could wind up without a volunteer fire department and ambulance association, that retention and recruitment are at risk, and I worry that the more we do this, the more we delay, the more it will affect their morale. I cannot imagine how unappreciated they must feel, and we know we can all say the words, "We appreciate you," but words are cheap. It's time to put our money where our mouths are. Funding is one issue, but money in the budget is useless unless and until the Board of Selectmen approve the plan. We urge you to approve not only the funds, but that the Board of Selectmen approve the plan in time for this to be retroactive to last July as requested.
Unless we go into a spreadsheet and change the number.
So good evening, and thank you. I'm Donnie Venuti, I'm the fire chief in the town of Killingworth. So the leadership of both the Killingworth Volunteer Fire Company and the Killingworth Ambulance Association have been working on the service recognition plan for almost 2 years, and have put in well over hundreds of hours to revamp it, which includes the pension plan that has not been revised in over 30 years. We have worked with the town's actuary, and everything that has been asked of us has been provided months ago to the Board of Selectmen. The additional information that the Board of Selectmen are waiting for is a second opinion from another actuary. We have been told that this plan will be completed hopefully before July 1st. We believe it'll be beneficial to approve the additional $20,222, seeing that the Board of Finance already put in $20,000 in good faith. This way, the pension can continue to move forward with the effective date of July 1st, and the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance will not have to come back to the town before June 30th for additional funds.
Good evening. As Rob already outed me, I'm Dan O'Sullivan. I am president of the Ambulance Association and trustee of the Fire and Ambulance Pension Fund. Before I talk about my disagreements, I just want to recognize it. So it's easy for this to get emotional and adversarial, and a lot of cooperation has happened in getting us to where we are. The Board of Selectmen a year plus ago put $40,000 into the budget to have us look at this, and they asked us to go out and look. There was a disagreement on one of the elements, and they asked us to step back and look at the whole thing. And we've done that over the last 14 months. Lou Annino specifically asked that we look at younger members and what we could do for them. And that led us to develop a cash stipend in lieu of abatement for people that don't have property. Kathy Eno helped us move it along while in her last 6 months as first selectman, and Nancy picked up and helped us move it along. And there was preliminary approval by the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Finance, when we went before them, as a show of support for doing it, put in roughly half of the amount it takes, but it's half the amount, not the whole thing. Nancy kind of summarized where we are now, but I have a little different perspective on that. Until yesterday, they said we were waiting, one of the things we were waiting for on the pension fund was the ordinance that they were drafting. And we pointed out that the current pension fund isn't in the ordinance, why would this one need to be? And they researched and said, no, we don't need it, we only need that for the stipend. So there were three things we were waiting for. One of them doesn't even apply to the pension fund. Interestingly, it does apply to the stipend, and we were supposed to be waiting for it on the pension fund, but they have the stipend amount in the budget. So, you know, there's an inconsistency there. One of the other things is to have the new plan drafted. The trustees, Rick is another trustee, recognized this a couple of years ago, that we needed a new plan drafting. We had a plan that once the new terms of the pension plan were settled on, we would go to someone who provides this service, who's already familiar with our plan, and get it drafted. This would have been easier in terms of education, probably less costly, but the town didn't even give them a chance to bid on doing drafting for this plan. So there was a missed opportunity there. But more importantly, for getting approval of the plan, this is a government plan. It is a qualified plan, qualified government plan, despite being volunteers. But it does not need to be drafted before it is approved and put into place. Government plans are very loose on this. And we fully support, and we had planned to get it redrafted. That is important, but it doesn't need to be done before this is put into effect. And the final element is the actuarial review. And another disclaimer, I am an actuary. And as such, you know, I always love to see actuaries getting work. But as a taxpayer, I'm not so keen that we get to pay for this twice. We got our first pricing for this from the town's plan actuary over a year ago. We've had dozen or more Zoom calls, meetings, phone calls with him to fine-tune the understanding of what the plan provisions are, to adjust them, largely to reduce the cost, to keep it more, more affordable for the town members. And over the course of that year, we got the final numbers from them January 24th, 14 or 24th, and presented those as the plan actuary's numbers to the town. This is the actuary that the town has been using for the last 7 years. They do the biennial valuation. He's gone through this calculation multiple times because of the multiple versions we've asked him to do. I think the chances that he has any significant error are astronomically low. And so I think the money we're spending to get it reviewed by someone who we fired as the actuary 7 years ago is wasted money. And I think I would ask the Board of Finance to put the remaining money in now, and the Board of Selectmen to approve the pension plan adoption. We know the number's not going to change, and so there's no reason to get it into the budget and have it baked into the mill rate that comes out of that process. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for letting us speak tonight. I'm Mike Haga, I'm the Chief of Service, Killingworth, Hampton. I would like to take this a little bit different perspective. We have a very, very difficult time keeping volunteers. It's a statewide problem, it's a nationwide problem. I don't know how many of you have read the Hartford Current, but last Wednesday, there was an article about the lack of volunteer EMTs in the state of Connecticut, and the number of volunteer ambulance services that are just closing their doors and shutting down. Avon, for one, could not get enough. They lost half of their volunteer EMTs, so they had to shut down. The town had to put into their budget $687,000 to replace that volunteer service. Annually, yes. Yeah. Coventry was another one that has gone to paid EMTs. They budgeted $500,000 annually. And closer to home, Durham has just recently shut down their ambulance service, and they're in the process of contracting Middlesex Healthcare to cover their ambulance. I'm not familiar with the numbers for the fire department. I would imagine they're larger. I need 2 people to cover an ambulance. They need a lot more than 2 people to cover a fire. So I just, you're looking at $40,220 some as opposed to $500,000. So that's just the point I want to make. None of us volunteers are in this for the money. I think that this is just a small token of appreciation for the volunteers. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. My name is Rick Darren. I'm the senior trustee of the fire company and the chairman of the Killingworth Board of Fire Commissioners. And in 8th grade, I walked up onto that stage and got my diploma in 1977. Just wanted to note that many memories are crossing my mind right now. Thank you for giving us a chance to come here tonight and talk about this very important subject for all of us. And I want to thank the Board of Selectmen for all the meetings that we've had and all the exchange of information, and the Board of Finance for listening to us. It's extremely frustrating because I sat there tonight getting ready to come up here and try to compose my thoughts on something that's a very emotional subject for us because we believe in what we do and we've been in this for many, many decades. Some of us, Alan Chapman, maybe since what, Alan?
65 years.
65 years. So, we were asked a year ago to look into this, and we did a very, I believe, comprehensive job of doing that. Many meetings with Dan and I, and Dick Bauer is the sitting fire chief at the time, Donnie, the Board of Fire Commissioners, many people with Mike, all the service leaders. And we believe we put together a very comprehensive package that we delivered to the Board of Selectmen and to the Board of Finance. The unfortunate reality is, I sat there tonight and I heard that we need an ordinance to get this pension through, and then Nancy corrected that we do not. And that's the level of problems we've been having, is that there's a lot of misinformation, despite the fact that we delivered an airtight package to the town. And we can appreciate that, and we understand that there's going to be, misunderstandings, but we are really here tonight to ask the Board of Finance to please put this into the budget this year. Simple, and we've been through the details, we've been through the numbers, we looked at the mill rate, we looked at, does it incent young people, old people, middle people, how can we make the abatement work for Ben Chassie, who went to 180 calls during COVID, selflessly, and never got a penny for that because he doesn't qualify for the abatement because he lives with his parents, and we hope he lives in town forever so he can go to more calls. So we've been through this. We really did not see the need for the other actuary to come in to verify the actuary's work that we had met with several times, both with Nancy and with Kathy. But we accepted that, and we were hopeful that episode could meet the timeline. We knew we had a diminishing timeline. We want this in for July 1. We've put a lot of work in on this. There are really no more hurdles in the road than the town getting the update from the actuary. We don't think it's necessary. How long would that take? I don't know. A pension attorney, okay. We've been working on the replan for years. It should get done. Those are just implementation administrative steps. So without talking a lot, because I can talk a lot, and I believe in the fire company with my entire being and with the services that people do in this room, I'm going to ask your Board of Finance to please put that $20,222 back in there this year. I know, Rob, you said it's a rare occasion for that to occur. I believe that there has never been a more rare occasion in our history than right now. I would echo Mike's comments that volunteerism in this state we're doing a great job in Kenilworth. We've got people that are going to calls, and it's a. Thank you. You're always there for me. Wants me to say, in my role as the director of the dispatch center, I see this, and I see many of the towns beyond Kenilworth. So we're doing a great job, but these are tough times for volunteerism. So we know we have the support from out here, and we just need you guys to do this and to figure out a way to do this. We know the selectmen support this, and we're just asking for a positive outcome tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Anyone else? One more. I'll walk this way and come around.
Don Venuti, I support the fire department. You should give them what they want. Actually, you should put in an extra $100,000. These guys get up, the little beeper goes off. These people that are here are just a handful. How many people are in the town of Kenilworth? These guys run, boom, 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 put the fire out. This guy's having a heart attack. This guy got a broken leg. Let's go help her. She can't breathe. I mean, it's just crazy. And then that one gentleman, he had a perfect thing about the volunteers and this and that. Now, suppose you had to have, my son Donnie works in a full-time fire department in Guilford. Suppose you needed a full-time fire department here. How much money would you have to put in for that budget? No ambulance, you gotta get all these people. I mean, suppose they got mad and they all quit. Then you'd have to go have a paid fire department. An ambulance. I mean, I don't know what, talking about this little bit of money, just crazy. You guys should give them a ton. I can't figure out what you're thinking. I really just can't figure it out. Really? What I hear you talking about, once again, I lived here my whole life. I'll be 63 years in another couple of weeks. The new town hall. Oh my God. Well, when you do it, put in some extra money for a drive-up window so I could throw a wallet in when I drive by once a month to take what you want out of it. It's just completely crazy, but no. You should put in a ton more money for these people. They bend over backwards constantly. It's just crazy. Thank you.
They say that timing is everything. I've been a Killington resident for 8 days. Killington is here. So I felt compelled to speak because I've been a volunteer fireman where I'm from since 1986. I served until 2007, and I left as chief of the department. I did a comparative study in 2005. I don't know how relevant the numbers are now, but our budget at the time was $456,000 with 3 engines, a ladder, 2 ambulances, and a rescue truck. Fortunately, there's a neighboring department that had paid people with the same amount of equipment. Their budget was $4.1 million in 2005, and they still needed volunteers. They could only get 1 engine out and a ladder with a driver without the volunteers. I've served as a police officer for 24 years and I'm retiring this year. That's why I moved here. And the concept of the slippery slope is evident around the Northeast and maybe the country. I've heard stories of companies disbanding, ambulances going away, service disappearing, and the concept of the stipend is in operation in Westchester County where I'm from, mostly for medical personnel, for the ambulance. But the concept is you're not rewarding them at all. You're recognizing them, okay? And you're recognizing them not for what they do every day, but for what they might have to do in that horrendous moment. I served through 9/11. I was down there that day with our fire department. Every single person there was terrified, absolutely terrified. You see them out there maintaining the equipment, they're washing, they're polishing, they're holding their functions, okay? Yes, that's all great. But when you're in that hallway on your belly with the flames over your head, you're definitely second guessing yourself, okay? And that's what they do. They take care of you. They hold your grandmother's hand when she's having a heart attack. They show up at any time like everybody says. But it's because of what they might have to do, not because of what they do every day. So I'd just like to say that from my standpoint, being serving a police officer for 24 years, watching them in action, watching them support me in my efforts as a law enforcement officer, having served with them, I can tell you that it's money well spent, and the fiscal cost of allowing them to disappear and dry up like a little puddle will be horrendous for your community. Absolutely horrendous. And for my own sake, I felt I had to say something. I'm brand new here. I plan to spend the rest of my life here. It's beautiful. We came here for that. Okay? I drove by the firehouse. I saw how well maintained everything was. These guys look like they do a great job. I can't speak to that experience, but I know in my heart that when you see that truck and it's spotless, it's a reflection of their professionalism and their commitment. So that's my message. And thank you.
Excuse me, sir, we need your name for the minutes. First of all, welcome to Killingworth, but second of all, we need your name.
Anthony Gentile.
Anthony Gentile. Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh.
Good evening. My name is Tim Gannon. I live on Schnorr Road. I've been there for almost 50 years. I know many of the members of the fire department and the ambulance association. They are incredible people. They deserve the respect and all the time that they put in. A minor example of their dedication is I have the fortunate to work with Dan O'Sullivan at the Sugar House at Barnley Farm. I have to say, probably of the days that we worked, Dan left us to go answer a call for an ambulance call, probably 3 times in one day, and a couple other days there was at least 2 times. So Dan, I want to thank you personally and all the folks from the ambulance and the fire company for all the dedication that they do. And this amount of money that should be put towards this fund definitely should happen. And I know many of the firemen, they go out at the weird hours at night, so do the ambulance people. And this is something that definitely should be taken care of. One other thing is I'm in total support of funding the additional money for the Killingworth Crier. I've been a long-time resident of the town, and I find that the information in the crier is very important for many of the people in town. I think it's something that's read on a regular basis, and it's a small ask. So I would support both the fire department, ambulance, and the Killingworth Crier. Thank you.
Good evening. I am Dawn Mooney, and I'm speaking to you tonight as a 30-year Killingworth resident, homeowner, and taxpayer. I wish to voice my support of both the Killingworth Volunteer Fire Company and the Killingworth Ambulance Association. The selfless members of these organizations spend their free time running into dangerous situations, whether it be fire or COVID, for the good of Killingworth's residents, and in my opinion, deserve the proposed First Responder Service Recognition Plan. For this reason, I respectfully request that the Board of Finance fully fund this line item with an additional approximately $20,000. I am volunteering to be taxed for this. Thank you.
I'm Jan O'Sullivan, I'm Dan's wife, and I just want to voice my support also for what he's done. I know how many hours he spent just on the actuarial part of it. I did that my own actuarial review. But anyway, and then I know about the middle of the night stuff too. So, and thank you for all of you, and Alan and everybody that's been doing this. So yes, put the money in. And support the crier. That's important to me. I'm on the board of the library and the Historical Society, and I ran Helping Hands for 10 years. So let's do all of that. I assume everybody's also here because they saw that the library had a big chunk of money taken out of what our request was, and you're all here to express your outrage. But I guess not. I just wanted to say, in case you did notice it, that as treasurer of the library, I did go to that first in-person meeting you had, and Lucinda Hogarty, who's the president, and I went, and we had a really good discussion with the Board of Finance. I didn't agree with them taking the money out, because in good faith, I applied for a PPP loan for the library, and at the time, it wasn't anybody who's currently on the board, but I was told, you know, just use appropriately, it won't affect your budget, and it appears now that it is affecting our budget. Well, anyway, I particularly was interested in Rob's presentation when you got to the point about the 2 months of operating expenses that you get to have, because your point to us was you didn't want us to have a lot of money in reserve, and as an actuary I did make a big point about wanting reserves because we know for a fact, this isn't a contingency, we know for a fact that we lost $14,000 a year in income when our Middletown Adult Ed program stopped renting our meeting room. So to me, having a cushion there, because we can't have a golf tournament big enough to raise $14,000. And we're having a golf tournament, but that was interesting to me, that you get to do that, and yet you didn't seem to want us to do something like that. And I do understand, let me just reiterate, I do understand, they're really doing their job well, because they really were focused on, it's our job not to give people money and taxpayers on it if we don't think they should, you know, I get it, I do get it. But I couldn't not say anything, and our board met last night, and so I you know, carry some of what their comments are as well. But I did assure them last night that I understood where you were coming from, and I get it. I think, oh, by the way, our employees don't have a pension, so we got to work on that. But after what I've seen Dan go through, somebody else better do it. Anyway, I guess I'm done. I wrote all this stuff down. I think I said most of it, so thank you for listening. Support the library. We could use more volunteers too. And it's not, you don't have to go out and get really money. It's really great. We have a great desk job and you're selling money, so thanks. There you go.
Thank you. I just want to say, I did mean to say, let me get to you in 1 second. I did mean to say something about the library reduction, and I forgot. There were two things I meant to say. So just, I'll give you a chance to rebuttal after this. So, when you're looking at this, there's almost $17,000 taken out of waste removal. That's a contract thing. That's not something we cut. I think Nancy negotiated that. So that's great. Just so everyone's clear, and again, you get a chance. You get a chance to rebuttal here. It is a very large reduction for the library, $69,500, I think. But just so everyone's clear, that doesn't mean that the library will have $69,500 fewer dollars to spend this year. Whatever their budget is, and I forget now, but that will be spent on all the things you want to do with whoever you want to hire and books you want to buy and things you want to do, and they'll all be there. But, and maybe this was clear already, but the reason we did that is, in our conversation, it was found that there was this contingency fund in addition to an endowment fund, but this contingency fund of more than $69,500. And so that's how that decision was made, so that that money would be used rather than taxing everyone. And the other concept was that when next budget season comes along, you won't be reset at that figure. Right. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Yeah.
Just say we do support the library.
Oh yeah. But I wanted that to be. Yeah. But I do.
I wanted it to be clear that I was here. No, you know, that if people saw that number.
Yeah. Yes, and hopefully that's clear between these two things, that the library will not be $69,000 shorter this year. It's just coming from a different bucket.
Good evening. My name is Jim McDonald. I know how to speak into a microphone. I'm up here because I want to talk about the library cut. Oh, and by the way, I've lived here since 1979. The library was where Helping Hands was, down at the Circle. And we didn't have any paid staff, and they did a wonderful job providing this town a great service. And then they got this wonderful opportunity to build a building. The Volunteer Library Board raised all the money to build a building. We got donations from labor and support. I think Arlene Tunney donated her time, right, to design the building. This cut, you see there's a number here, $85,000 that was cut out of the budget. There's a negative number on the last page. It says $85,663. for the total town budget. And the $69,500 that was cut from the library represents 81% of that cut. So they took $69,000 away from the library. 81% that was cut from the budget by the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance, this town, does not pay everything for the library. The library board is dedicated to raising money in excess. So if we have a reserve, it's because we're planning for contingencies. And to say that you're going to guarantee us more money next year, the support of the town, to support the library, I think is disingenuous. This is an organization that supports every citizen in this town, the oldest and the youngest. And you slashed $70,000 out of their request. Did the library ask for an increase? No, it hadn't. It didn't ask for an increase. It wanted to maintain the town's support to the library. And the Board of Finance took $70,000 out of that budget. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Again, that was taken out, just so we're clear, that was taken out because it was in a PPP contingency fund. Well, I've said it before. Thank you. Well, it's in a contingency fund, $99,000 in a contingency fund, and that's where that $69,500 came from.
So the library's being punished for $69,500 because they took out a loan that was offered to that library and many other organizations that we may have had to pay back to keep us operating during COVID. Offering this town and its citizens all kinds of services while everything else was closed.
Yeah, I won't get it.
Don't tell me they took out a loan and it was forgiven by the government, and now you're taking away $70,000 from the library.
Jim.
Yeah, I won't get it.
They got the money from the government. I think that's everybody in this room. I don't get it. That's everybody in this room. They got it from, is it federal or state? I believe it's federal money. So instead of taxing local people, we elected to use the money that they got from the federal government, right?
Just a couple issues on that. First of all, a couple of thoughts. On the pension issue, I'm self-employed. My employer's a bit of a jerk, and I don't have a pension either. Okay, so I mean, I know a little bit about that. A couple things. We'll go backwards. On the library, library did receive PPP funding in 2 tranches of funding that they got. There's a concept in the law, it happens in bankruptcy law, where the government or the bankruptcy trustee can claw back money that's not been properly used. The money was supposed to be used to keep employees. An employee was let go. We're concerned that the federal government could possibly...
That's not an accurate description of PPP.
Okay, it might not, but we do know that with PPP there have been new regulations coming out. So part of our thought process, and we had vigorous debate. We didn't have a unanimous vote, but lest anybody think that it's a partisan issue, I defy anybody, if you watched any of our meetings, to be able to pick out who's a Republican and who's a Democrat. We tend not to be that way. We'll discuss things vigorously, we'll make a vote. And that's what we did. So with regard to the library, that was our thought process, right or wrong. That was our thought process that, you know what, this money is sitting in a separate account, not the endowment, a separate account, and we don't want necessarily the government to come back and claw some money back. So we thought, why tax the taxpayers for that? There was a reduction. There was a debate on the amount of the reduction. There was some disagreements. We vetted it. We voted. And that's how that went.
We should have spent it. We should have just spent it on anything.
Understood. The second point, I know this couple things.
We're fiscally responsible.
Understood. And so is the town, by the way, with regard to the funding that we have. So we're trying to do that reasonably as well. With regard to the fire department, It was fully funded, $40,000 in last year's budget, okay? Well, yeah, in this current year's budget. For the next budget, we discussed this. We put in $20,000 in good faith, waiting to get full determination from the Board of Selectmen, fully intending to go ahead and put the other $20,000 in. So I mean, you're heard. I don't think there's anybody up here that dislikes the Ambulance Association, the fire department. We all know it's going to be millions and millions if we have to do some other new organization. With regard to the Kenilworth Crier, again, there was a robust discussion. There were some disagreements. One thing I do want to say is, this is what I like about living in a small town. Everybody can make their voices heard, and if you want to say something else when the meeting's over, come on up and tell us. That's important, because then we take votes based on what you say. But I also want to thank everybody who's been speaking so far, because it shows your love and interest in this town.
I actually have a question. I don't need a microphone. I just want to be clear. What the crier is asking for is not to be subsidized by the taxpayer. What the crier is asking for is that the town pay a portion of what they would normally charge anybody else utilizing that space in their publication. The town uses, correct me if I'm wrong, about 2.5 pages in the crier every month. I've bought pages in the crier, it's about $365 a page. So the town is getting $600, $730, almost $800 a month in free space in the crier. The crier isn't even asking for that $800 a month. They're only asking for a portion. To me, I told the crier in our discussions, send them the bill, let them not pay the bill. Let's see how that goes. They don't want to be that direct. I'm more of a direct person. I wish that they would take that tack. They don't want to do that. We like having the crier. It's part of what makes our town unique. It's part of that small town feeling, just like the fire department, just like the ambulance association. I think you pay, in my world, you pay for goods and services you receive. They are not asking to be subsidized. But without this money, we could also lose the crier. And that's literally pennies to each one of us. We're just paying for what we get. And interestingly, I was told, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, that Youth and Family Services requested a certain dollar amount, and Board of Finance actually gave them more money than they were asking for, to the tune of $10,000?
Motion to give them
$10,000. Why would you give a group more money than they said they needed?
It failed, but they
It failed, but the motion was made, it was put out there, and not give the fire department what they're telling you. $25,000, I don't know why that came up, the $25,000 overage. That's simply because the cost of goods and services have gone up, and they needed a little more money. What you all need to know is that during COVID, these gentlemen came in to the fire department, did the necessary structural changes to the building. We were told last night at the Board of Selectmen meeting that they need a gate on their training facility. They're not asking the town for the money for that. They are building it themselves with a donation from a fireman, a member of their department. They just want permission to put it up. So, I mean, this is a silly conversation. $20,000, put it in, pay for the crier, it's pennies. To offer to throw money at an organization that wasn't even asking for it, and then we're dickering over what's essentially less than $30,000, I'm sorry. It's childish, it's small.
Okay, anyone else? Is that everyone?
Marcel, you shouldn't make fun of people in the audience. We're talking, you shouldn't.
I'm
make fun.
talking to her.
I know, but you're
It's a
representing
private
us. We elected you. You should not do that.
Well, you know what? I didn't get elected to be chastised and to be called ridiculous.
All right, so let me just say,
Let's
does
just
anyone
try.
else wish to speak on any of the issues? Otherwise, we'll take a recess, and I'll thank everyone for coming here and for all your comments. But I don't want to cut it off if anyone else has anything to say or any further questions or anything. Okay. All right, so we're going to take a recess, and at least momentarily, to reset ourselves and let you folks move out if you want, and when things quiet down, we'll continue with our meeting. Thank you for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey,